All right, hey guys, what's up? It's your course director, Emily Ray here. Just wanted to give you some positive, productive feedback on these resumes that you recently submitted. So I've got them all queued up here in a browser window, and we're going to go through each one of them individually and kind of just point out, what's working and maybe what could continue to be evolved between now and the next iteration of this, which will likely come in your Portfolio 7 class. Keep in mind your resume is never going to be finished. You're always learning new things, developing your skill set, gaining new experience, and so it's always important to have a workable copy, an editable copy of this so that you can add to it as you continue to build your skills. So we're going to start here with Jasper, and what I love about this is that Jasper actually sent me another version of it that looks remarkably different. So if we just want to take a quick side-by-side comparison with this one, it looks pretty minimalist. We do have kind of all of the required information, except of course I don't see much in the way of contact, like how do we get in touch. I don't see anything here in terms of a portfolio website that you could point to. So your resume is where you're going to say what you can do, and your portfolio is where you're going to back that up and show what you can do. But Jasper went ahead and took the time to evolve it from this place to this one. And so on this one, we can see very much so we've got the contact information, the portfolio website, and this is just generally a more readable copy. Scrolling down, we can see this one has a lot more information. So for each one of these positions, Jasper was able to go into more detail about what it meant to hold those positions for those different organizations, which is great. Kind of just scrolling up here to the top, I'm not sure if it's possible to get this down to one page, but if you could, that would be ideal. There is a lot of information on the second page, so I don't know if that's really possible. Looking at the work history that you're sharing here, a lot of this is freelance videography work, and like some of it is doing different kinds of work for different organizations. Can you consolidate your freelance into a single entry and talk about kind of what you generally do for clients would be a question. Also, your subheadings here, work history, are in all caps, but summary isn't. So it's a slight, inconsistency with your style there. There's also a few places where there's this extra comma that starts out at the front of, this particular position. So something that you'll want to look at just in terms of dotting your I's, crossing your T's, and making sure that everything is, has a keen editing eye on it. The last thing I want to note is that it doesn't look like there's a lot of margin space over here. So you just want to observe a consistent padding around the document that you create, so that if you're having this much space over here, you're reflecting it the same over in this way, so it's not looking scrunched up. I think the last thing I want to note on this one is with your software skills, the proficiency score. I've never seen this really done this way. I mean, it's kind of interesting to quantify Premiere knowledge or After Effects knowledge, but these are generally creative, programs and software, and so it's likely going to be more about what you can create with these, pieces of software, and how do you share that on your resume would then be the question. And in my opinion, it would be providing a link to your portfolio website where I can see, how deep you can go into Premiere or After Effects. So this seems like information that you're sharing that doesn't tell me much in an objective way. Like I can't understand what that translates to in your skill set. So definitely think about, as you, are maybe trying to consolidate this down to a single page resume, what in here is information that you're sharing that doesn't adequately contextualize what you're trying to say and perhaps could be removed. So next up, we're going to take a look at Alec. And so, definitely a lot of pop of color. We've got the contact information up here, but I don't see a portfolio website. But here, content advisor, editor, motion graphic, and this is all very visual work. And so certainly, over here, I do want to point out that Jasper has his custom domain name, and it is a small but very important step to take to increase the professionalism of your brand. So as you guys are working on those portfolio websites, go that extra step and get that domain name that's going to cost you $10 to $20 a year, but also reflect a heightened degree of professionalism. Kind of looking at what Alec is sharing here, we get this summary statement about the work that he does and kind of where he's focused. We've got the education here. I would say that if you have college experience, that the high school experience doesn't need to be listed unless, and so here's the caveat, if you have some sort of special designation on the curriculum that you took that is supportive of your career goals. So as a creative, going to a digital design high school for 4 years is actually relevant and important, or if you went to a special charter school. Otherwise, your college education kind of trumps, that you got a high school diploma, right? It's a requirement for you to get into college to have that diploma. But this adds more information, more context to understanding how long you've been training in these realms. Looking at just like the experience that you shared here, I'd like to see more about what it meant to hold these positions, right? So you have a good amount of experience in this industry, and you've worked for some, big names here. But like, what did you do for them specifically? I see the role, right? But what does it mean to hold that role? What can you tell me about your skill set? You have room on this document to be able to expand into that a good deal more. Overall, it has the information, but there are a few things that you can add that would give us a better picture. So next, looking at Kim's, so like really visually striking to start. Great color palette, great layout and composition with the design. We've got the website here and then other places to connect like LinkedIn. What I want to say is that there's a lot in this snapshot. Like if you're going to have 2 pages, there's a lot of extra space on this one, and this one looks a little crowded. And so I would encourage you, if you're not going to be able to bring it down to 1 page, how can you spread this information out in a way that feels a little bit more airy and balanced between the 2 pages? Your use of headings and subheadings is really effective. You create a very scannable document. Hiring managers spend about 6 seconds looking at a resume before they put it in a pile of callback or not callback. And so you want to make it as readable as possible. Looking at what you've produced here, I see just a few kind of competing ideas, and that would be, that you have this, Oh Hey Heroes company or endeavor that you've been doing for quite a few years, and that it is the basis kind of your professional growth and where you want to head. But then we also have some other information here about your work history and being in the medical field. And so certainly that shows that you were able to hold a position. It tells a lot about your orientation to detail. It tells a lot about your loyalty to a company, in that you have a very process analytical side, but it doesn't speak so much to your ambitions in media or communications. And so my curiosity would be, does it make sense to have a resume that's just more focused on what you want to do in the communications realm? And really only you can answer that. And also the answer might be, you have multiple resumes, right? So like every time you are giving this to someone, it's for a reason, it's for an opportunity. And so your resume could be It could be modified, enhanced, and emphasized in the areas that you want to emphasize for that particular position. Love the color scheme. I know I said that. Kind of going down. I appreciate, like, now you talk about relevant coursework and then your leadership and freelance experience. So this stuff seems like it's fitting, really great with this other experience that you have up here with Oh Hey Heroes, and wondering about how supportive this information is of your overall goals. So just something for you to be thinking about as you move forward and use this in a way to advance, your career and your ambitions in this space. Taking a look at Maria, so media communications, and like a very kind of neatly outlined look at your work history and personal profile, right? So we've got a picture up here, L and B. I can't really see what this says, and so for that reason, it's not enhancing the design, right? Like it's kind of detracting from it because I can't read what this says. So something that you want to think about is if it's not clearly being able to be read, then it's missing the mark. If you're putting words on a page, the idea is that you want people to read them. If you can't read them, then it's not doing its job. So, whatever this is, thinking about, is it necessary? And if it is, how can I make sure that people can read it? So we've got your personal profile over here. It talks about who you are and what you want to do, the areas that you specialize, some contact. We've got your portfolio site over here. Again, you guys want to be thinking about that custom domain name because this is not something that you would be able to tell somebody and they would remember it easily, right? Instead of it just being, for simplicity's sake, maria.com, which someone could very easily go in and type and remember. This would be almost impossible for someone to remember if you just told them what it was. The other thing too is that with bulleted lists, you always want to left align a bulleted list. That kind of listing function is meant to create a scannable experience of the document, and you can't really do that if there's this sort of jagged alignment that is caused from when you center align a bullet, right? So this is actually the appropriate layout and alignment for bullets, because what happens is that in English, when we're reading from left to right, our eyes scan the page in an F-shaped pattern. So we're looking for headings or subheadings, and we're scanning it to look for the information that's going to support why we are exploring the document or the website in the first place. And as our eyes kind of continue down the page, we're just kind of doing this vertical scan of the information to look for what's relevant to our search. And so, because we know that about user experience and behavior, it would bode well to lay our information out in such a way in that F-shaped pattern. So looking at your work history here, this is all laid out in a way to help facilitate that scanning. But this information, which is center aligned, does not. So I would revisit this and make it look a bit more like this over here. You've got a couple of places in your work history where you talk about what it means to do that job. It seems like there is a possibility to go a little bit deeper into some of that. You have room on the document, and if you're going to stick to one page, really utilize that one page, so that you can share as much about yourself as possible. Looking at Lamar's next, right? So the first thing that struck me about this is that it's clean, and then I went over here and my eyes kind of jumped to this section, and there was a disconnect for me because they're not lining up, right? So profile doesn't actually line up with this section, and work experience doesn't actually line up here with the work experience. And so I think that it would be a more direct association from the title of this section to the content of this section if you were to put that just directly above it there. I also don't see that you have a portfolio website. I'm wondering if Reaction Media Group, I'm trying to click on it. It's not a workable link here. I'm not sure about, if I were to download this instead of viewing it in a browser. Looking at what is possible here. We see some different font weights and styles here, bigger, bolder. You want to be consistent with that. You list a number of positions that you've held, but like you don't go into depth about what you did for these. So my recommendation would be spend a little bit of time talking about what it meant to do the work in these spaces. Additionally, you want to put your most recent work at the top and go from like the present to the past, so people can see kind of where you are now and sort of historically, chronologically, where you've been. I would maybe put this stuff in a bulleted list. You spend a lot of space on this, talking about like this skill set. But can you reflect this skill set in what you did in each of these positions? Can you tell me what you did as a digital marketing specialist for Reaction Media Group that maybe encompassed and showcased some of the skills in this area? Here it looks like we've got some awards, right? But again, like the association is really off. Just a slight modification in that area would go a long way for us just to be able to see and understand the content for the different sections that you have here. And also add that portfolio site and bulk this section up. Next, taking a look at Ryan. So very, very simplistic here. You talk about being a storyteller, managing and motivating others, perform multiple tasks. You don't talk a lot about your creative work, but you talk about knowing, having these skills with some pretty sophisticated Adobe software. I don't see a link to a portfolio site, so there I can't make an assessment about kind of who you are as a creative or what you might be able to do if I were to hire you either in a freelance or an employment capacity. And so also looking at your work history, there's a lot of management experience for sure, which tells me a little bit about like the soft skills that you have, but again, nothing much about your creative side. And so here I think there's just a need for greater contextualization of the skill set. Like if you're sharing that you do this creative work, where are we seeing it reflected either in your freelancing, in your portfolio, and maybe even in some of these positions, right? Like, are there things that you do in these jobs that can reflect some of your media communications background? In portfolio, the idea is that you are kind of looking at where you want to take this skill set and where you want to take your career as a media professional, and making sure that you have the skills and abilities that will set you up to succeed in positions like that, right? So if you would forward think outside of school and graduation to say, you know what, I want to work in social media in that realm, you would need to take a look at, well, what do social media specialists or strategists, what are the skill sets that they have? Identify what you need and what you have and the gap between those, and then your portfolio and school experience becomes about developing those specific skills to help you be successful. So, I can see that you have a deep commitment to work and a really nice minimalist approach. But what's missing for me here is like a connection to you in school and where you want to be after school. Next up, we are taking a look at SAMs. So we've got an objective and then like your skills right up here at the top. A lot of people, people skills up here. Looking at the experience, account managers. We've got your education down here as well, contact information, LinkedIn. This isn't linking, but then it also looks like we have like a style guide for your resume here, which is interesting. I like to see how you've translated the colors and the fonts into this document for sure. But this wouldn't be appropriate to send out, right? With this information tacked onto it. You have a lot of space here to go into more depth about, what you did for each of these positions and kind of connect it to where you have this objective, right? To join an organization and to have a career advancement, but that's so broad. And it's especially broad knowing the kind of the many things that one could do in the media communications realm. So I encourage you here to both build this section out a little bit more, talking about what you did in these positions, but also how are you tying in what you're doing in school to enhance this snapshot of you as a professional. And so my encouragement here is more tie-in to take where you've been and this skill set that you're developing to where you are going. Certainly, I see a lot of of people-to-people work here, but I don't see a lot of work related to media, although that's where your education and your emphasis is, right? And so help me understand how you are going to use this degree, this curriculum, the skills and techniques that you've used to help enhance and really bolster your career aspirations. Last but not least, we're going to take a look at errands. So this one is a bit more text heavy and a little bit more traditional in the sense of a resume. Looking at it, there's no shortage of information about what your work experience has been and what you did in those positions. So you've done a really beautiful job of saying what it was like to be a banker in these spaces or a security officer. You talk about being a customer service representative, have these really awesome project management, time management skill sets, and you talk about relationships and driving business results. What I don't see here is the relation to your degree and kind of like potentially like where you want to take this. Looking at your skill set, you don't talk about like you're talking about proficient with multiple Adobe programs, okay, but I don't see that reflected in any of the work that you've done or on a portfolio website here. So just there's a kind of a curiosity within me about what is this degree for and how will it serve you moving forward. And the answer might be that you just have an interest in these things and it's not actually where you want to take your professional life, and that's okay. But I want that to be a mindful and intentional awareness, right? That you talk about having this background in media communications, but it's not reflected elsewhere, and it doesn't look like it's reflected in your ambition. So how do we tie that in a meaningful way so that this resume helps get you to the places that you want to be? If you guys have any questions about this feedback or about where to take your resumes from here, please let me know. Of course, the expectation is that you evolve this resume to its next best place based upon your own understanding of your goals, your professional aims, and of the feedback that was provided to you here. Hopefully you got a little bit of inspiration from looking at each other's work, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.